when did you kind of decide, you and Steve Lukather decide to kind of start Toto back up? Was that this year during the lockdown?
Yeah, well, the new lineup thing and all of that happened, during this year, all of that. But we knew all along, the two of us, that in some form we were going to keep working, in some way, shape, or form, whether it was going to be Toto or in some other incarnation or another band or whatever. We knew we were going to continue. We in what form we weren't sure, but we sort of discussed it, and we knew that Luke owns part of the name Toto, so why not use it? And that's pretty much what it boiled down to. So there's still plenty of life left in the band, and he and I just want to keep working. So we just decided, like, why not keep doing it?
Yeah, why not? Especially when it seemed like over the last few years, because is this the longest stretch that Toto had been touring in some shape or form? When was it? Since 2010 that you guys had been touring pretty much consistently?
Yeah, straight 10 years. Yeah, it's a long chunk of time. I mean, they've had longer stretches, or possibly same amount of time in terms of stretches on the road, but it was a nice chunk of time.
Yeah,
it was a nice run.
And I guess over that time, it would have allowed a lot of opportunity for you guys to gel, and specifically there seems to be a great friendship and partnership between you and Steve Lukather that's really continued to develop over that time. Was it a bit annoying to be kind of taken off the road for a bit? Obviously, coronavirus hasn't exactly helped.
Well, we knew anyway we were going to not be working this year. We all had come to the conclusion somewhere in the middle or towards in the last third of 2019 that we were going to stop, at least for a while. That if anything, we were going to take a break, something like that. If not, stop. So we knew that was coming. What the original plan, I think, was to pick it back up in the latter part of this year, that kind of thing, before the whole COVID thing started. So, but then when we got towards the end of the year, it just looked like everybody really needed a break, needed to sort of stop and clear away their cobwebs in their heads, all that kind of thing. And it was just kind of clear that certain people were not really in the good health to tour, and other folks just weren't really in the mood to tour anymore, that kind of thing. So it hit at the right time. Everybody really needed a break. So 2020 was sort of like a chance for everybody to kind of take a deep breath and get back to their lives at home and stretch a little. And
you've taken the time to make a great new album, which I really enjoyed listening to. And it's out on February the 26th, Denizen Tenant. And so you, by the sounds of things, from what I've read, you kind of put this together quite meticulously. I really enjoyed, there was this comment by Steve Lukather saying that, you were someone who really enjoyed kind of staying up late, working, crafting it, as meticulously as possible. Is that an accurate representation of how the process was?
It is, yeah. I mean, I started chipping away at songs, or at least starting to collect them and write them in 2016 when I was on the road. But I knew that when 2020 came around, since we weren't going to work, that was going to be the year that I really, put my nose to the grindstone and finished it and completed all the songs and all of that. 2020 was that year. And that's exactly what I did. I spent probably 3.5, 4 straight months sitting right here, just, working on it and sending tracks to other musicians and going to their studios, that kind of thing. And it was great. It was incredibly rewarding because I was able to do it exactly the way I wanted to. So,
yeah, I guess that's part of the benefit of you and Luke kind of releasing albums, solo albums, but at the same time, you kind of, for the fans, it's almost like getting a kind of Toto double album.
Yeah, I guess so. In a way. I mean,
with who's left, it definitely is, but without all the kind of, what must be a difficult process, too many cooks sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, with Toto, everybody in the band is a world-class producer, really. Everybody has produced great projects or themselves or anything. So everybody's voice, kind of must be heard, because everybody, really knows what they're doing. So, everybody listens to each other. We all take each other very, very seriously when producing together, that kind of thing. But no one person is ever going to have their own vision, right straight from the beginning to the end. In a band situation, it's understandable. But obviously, in a solo thing, you can do just exactly what you want to do, which for me is not very far off from what I would normally do, or what we would normally do in Toto. My stuff sounds very close to that, but in the material, you can hear the difference. In the songwriting, you can hear a difference. But in my production, it's very Toto, because that's kind of where my roots are. And also, all my life in my solo careers, I've always had those guys playing on my stuff too, so it sounds very Toto.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, there's the CWF kind of albums that you've done with Bill Chamberlain and Peter Friedstadt. Yeah. I interviewed Bill Chamberlain. Like, I loved his solo stuff, which I discovered through your albums that you guys made together. And the material is not a million miles off from Toto. It's just that great kind of melodic rock. And from all the guys who I've spoken to from this type of era and scene, they all point to the Beatles as being such a huge influence. So how come you chose If I Fell? I love that track from Hard Day's Night. And is that Steve who you're singing with on it? Because he's quite a big Beatles fan as well, isn't he?
That is Steve. I started messing around with it at home just by myself, and I just layered all my vocals on the whole thing. And then I thought, since it's a John and Paul thing, and that's what the brilliance of it was that it would be fun to just have Steve sing it with me. So that worked out great. But the reason I have that song and is just because I love it so much. I'm a singer. I'm a piano player too. Not great. I could never play live, but I play enough to write my songs, play on them, and all of that. But I'm a singer mainly, that kind of thing. So my album is about vocals. It's about vocals, and it's about vocal arrangements. And so therein lies the reason. Is just that it's about the vocal arrangement.
Yeah. And would you say that your voice has got better over time? Have you learned to kind of care for it more? I mean, it sounds like you can really hit those notes with quite a lot of power. Like, was that something that came naturally to you at the start of your career, or have you really worked on it over the years as well?
No, I've worked on it. I've had to learn how to do what I do. I've had to learn how to do it. I guess I had some natural ability as a singer when I was younger, but when I joined Toto, it was a hard gig. I mean, Bobby Kimball, the original singer, was not only a great singer, but he was such a loud singer. And both Fergie and Fergie, the singer that came right before me in the band, didn't have that volume, is really what it was. And that was actually part of the sound. And so both Fergie and I used to lose our voices all the time, trying to do that, trying to sing live and do all that high, powerful singing. So when we came back in 2010, I went to a teacher. I went back and found an incredible teacher in Los Angeles and worked for a couple of years on just how to do it right and how to gain power. And he taught me some operatic stuff and gave me some great exercises and, that told me to use them every day like I was going to the gym, which I did. And just over the course of the touring for the last 10 years, I did exactly what he told me to do, and it just made me a stronger singer. And it gave me the volume without the injury. just following his guidance. So I've become a much stronger singer without hurting myself. So win-win.
Yeah, because they are such challenging vocals. They're so high, like, and to get the power on them as well.
Yeah. Oh, and I know what I was going to say, but If I Fell was that's the album is vocal is vocal arrangements and stuff. And the thing about If I Fell was that when I was a kid, that song moved me. Something about the vocal harmony in it was the first time I felt emotion connected to music, and and it struck me and still sticks with me to this day. And something in the harmony, the way it was arranged, where it's a 3-part harmony, but the middle harmony is removed, which is sort of what that is in that song. I love that, and so I just that's a perfect example of what kind of harmonies I like. So that's why I wanted it to be on the record.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So does that mean that so some of the things that some of the elements of each one of those parts kind of has bits of what would be the third harmony, like it just doesn't move in the way that it normally would?
It's exactly right. That's precisely it, is that the John part touches on each of the other 2 harmony parts. If you consider what Paul is singing as the melody, then the John's harmony touches on what would be both parts in a 3-part harmony, and bounces around. And it's just, I don't know, it's just brilliant to me. It's just, I love that sound and that particular vocal arrangement and the harmonies.
Yeah, it really feels like, I mean, they would have been doing that obviously by ear, and as a Beatles, fanatic, like that's why the Beatles are so good to listen to when you're younger. It's because they sort of teach you harmony without it feeling like too much of an effort. So when you put together your own harmonies, are you doing it all by ear from your natural intuition, or do you ever kind of chart things out or write it out or do it like that?
It's a little bit of both, because I'm not a really trained musician, or heavily trained or heavily schooled, that kind of thing. My training is sort of picked up along the way. I was a TV composer for a long time and learned a lot, but I never went to music school or anything like that. So I kind of picked that stuff up along the way.
That's interesting that you didn't you just sort of picked it up. So the first time when you joined Toto, how much experience had you had in the music business? Were you friends with all of the guys? Because I for my part think Fahrenheit and the 7th one are some of the strongest Toto records, probably apart from Toto 4. To me, those are the best. Some really great tunes on them. So like was that pretty much your first big gig in the music industry back then? And was it that like pretty devastating at the time to come away from the band?
It was incredibly devastating, and yeah, that was probably my first real big gig. I had other good jobs before that. I was in a show in Vegas when I was, in my early 20s, imitating singers, which is one of the reasons they wanted me in the band. Yes, I was friends with them from before there was a band. I knew Luke when I was 14 and he was like 16 or 17. David Page's family goes back. His dad was friends with my dad before I was even born. They were colleagues. So I've known these guys my whole life. When it came time for them to look for another singer again, I think it was just like, hey, you want to give Joe a shot, because they knew who I was. And so that was kind of how I got in there. And yes, when I left the band in like 88, 89, I was devastated because it didn't work out as I like we were talking about before with the vocal training and stuff. I didn't have the training. I didn't have the strength to be able to do the job live. I worked really well in the studio with those guys, and which is one of the reasons why those albums were so great, was because I had a great songwriting rapport with those guys, and also I work really well in the studio. And so those aspects of my time with the band back then were great. And the Fahrenheit tour was great, but the 7th one tour, I start to fall apart as a live singer. You know, it's just the whole aspect of, you know, what it takes to do that job, taking care of yourself on the road and just being more mature, because that's what it really takes to be a good singer on the road. I didn't have that together at that age. So I had some growing up to do, which was necessary. And also I had a good career in TV and film as a composer while I was raising my daughters. And so I don't regret that for a second. That was a huge, wonderful part of my life. So it was just a blessing to be able to come back in 2010 and do this again. And, you know, then I just went and really trained up my voice this time.
Yeah, and I mean, it really showed, because the first time that I saw you guys at the Albert Hall, I was like knocked out by it, I have to say. So in terms of those albums, you know, Fahrenheit and the seventh one, are there any songs, you know, that you have a particular fondness for, that kind of stand out to you?
Well, Till the End is I'm very fond of. That was I think the first song I wrote with Dave, and I'm very fond of that tune. It's really fun to do live. It was just a good, snappy, powerful first tune to come up with Dave. I'm very fond of Could This Be Love?
That's a great tune.
It is. Could This Be Love was something that Dave had. It was one of those things where he had that kind of almost done. It would have, he had written that like during isolation, and it would have been, you know what I mean? And so it was a carryover from that, you know, to either would have been on that record or was going to be on Fahrenheit, but unfinished. And so we finished it, but Dave, very common with Dave is that he had most of it finished already. And most of it meaning the chorus, the whole "Could This Be Love?" and "I hear calling," that was all finished. And I love that. When I first heard that, I love that. So I'm very partial to that. And on the seventh one, listen, Pamela, you know, I mean, that was my other great collaboration with Dave, you know. So I'm very proud of that tune. And it's a big standout for me on that record.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. But Could This Be Love? That's a great tune. You know, hopefully, when you guys have ample opportunity to get all the deep cuts in there and all the album tracks in there during touring, we'll see a return of it to the set. But I wanted to ask you about your single of the new album, "Never Saw You Coming." What made you choose that track? Because I thought there were quite a few kind of contenders for a first single, but it was a really interesting choice, and it was something a bit. It wasn't necessarily what you'd expect to hear. Just like the arrangement was really interesting. I did think it was a cool choice, because it wasn't just a straight ahead like rock song or, you know, something like that, which you may have selected, or like a ballad. You know, it was quite unusual. Was that why you chose it? Just because you wanted something a bit left field?
Well, there are two or three or one or two, I should say, others that probably fit the bill as a quote unquote single, probably. And actually they will come out. They will come out later with videos and all of that. But I like this one as a first thing coming out, just because for me it sort of represents like what my sound is now. Does that make sense? It's just mood wise and lyrically and production wise and sort of the vocal arrangement and everything. It just is the best representation. It best represents to me what the album is.
And in terms of like the way that the album was produced, was every song kind of conceived slightly differently in terms of, you know, like recorded in different studios and with different people? Because there are some pretty, you know, big name contributors to the album, right? Was this all done in different places?
No, well, the method was the same. My studio was the hub for everything, and then and each tune was done the same way, but sent out to different people. With the exception of maybe Mike Landau, who worked on this record starting in say 2016, 17, he started, putting guitar tracks on unfinished ideas. So he was a part of the process from way early on, from pre-COVID. So we were over at his studio doing stuff, but that's about it. Everybody else I sent stuff to, and they would send me files back to just add into my computer here.
And then from there, did you build the tracks before recording the vocals?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then how long would it take you to record a vocal that, because considering some of the arrangements and stuff?
Well, it depends on the song. I mean, I spent a lot of time on vocals. The album for me, obviously the production, the sound of the production, everything is important. But for me, the what I wanted to show off here was vocals. I wanted to show off, vocal arrangements and voices. I've got my daughters singing on it who sound amazing. But it's a vocal project. I'm hoping that aspect comes across. So so we'll see. I forgot what your question was, but
yeah, sort of how long did it take to put them together? I mean, actually, one of the questions I had was who were the the ladies singing on the album? Because I did thought.
I know, I remember. Yeah, it depends. You asked me how long does it take? It depends on the song. I mean, couple of songs took me days, to do them.
Yeah.
But I have a method that I do. The way I do my vocals, I do them by myself. I have a great system of looping and recording myself and comping and everything, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time to do all those harmonies and stacking and all that kind of stuff. I would say that's the most time consuming part of the project, is doing all the vocals. Not the harmonies from the other singers. That stuff is easier because I have them there and they're singing and I can, great, that sounds great, just record them. But for me, I have a remote system with my mic that controls my bigger system, and I'm a little bit more hard on myself in terms of like what I keep and what I don't keep. So it takes a little bit longer. And then, I layer and layer and layer with all kinds of harmonies and doubles, and just I go crazy. And then I throw everything on, and then I go stop and I go down to the main system, and then I just sort through it. I sort through it for forever and then go back and fix and change and then sort through it some more. And every song kind of goes like that. It takes a while.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can hear that it's had that type of, like love for your craft put on it. I was interested in the tune like Wilma Fingerdo. That's how. So who programmed the beats on that? Because they're quite modern sounding in terms of they wouldn't feel out of place in a chart tune.
Yeah, no, that's my friend Barry Bregman, who's got a writing room over at his studio. He wrote "Never Saw You Coming" with me, and so I'm over at his house, and I went in the studio and I just put some changes down, and I asked Dylan Ronan, who's a friend of both of ours, who's a young guy, who's fabulous producer, up and coming guy, who produces those kinds of tracks. And I said to him, I want something, more current, groove wise for this thing, for this idea that I have. And I don't do that stuff really, really well. It's not my wheelhouse. The drums and kind of stuff that I program is a little bit more old school, if you will. And so we just make a groove for me. We, make like a loop for these changes. And so that's Dylan. Dylan Ronan is the guy, and he has a co-production credit on the song for that loop that he made.
That's cool. So, I mean, because of the fact that the music that you were involved in creating and the music that you're clearly influenced by, it is so good. Like I listen to it more than what's in the charts now, than what a lot of my mates are listening to. So it's kind of like, I'm wondering, do you listen much to modern pop music? you know, are there artists who you think are really great, or are you kind of immersed in the stuff that you've always liked?
It depends on what I'm doing. Like, for instance, you know, during a period where I'm making a record, and like this year, I made my record. I worked on Luke's record. I worked with Luke on Ringo's record. I worked on my video, Luke's video, and then we are doing this live stream thing. So my head has been in all of those projects, which means that during this period of time, I haven't listened to any new music. You know what I mean? Or if any, just a little bit here and there, maybe over at my daughter's house or on the radio, or, you know, in passing, that kind of thing. So I have to like go, wait, what do you want to know? Like, you want to know what new bands I'm listening to? And then there are other times where if I'm not making a record, or if we're on the road, say, I'm like, I could answer that question like that.
Yeah.
Where I'm listening to a lot more new stuff. But right now I'm like, I don't even know what's out there right now.
Yeah, I can imagine that, you know, it is really a question of time. I mean, who in like the previous years, let's say the previous, you know, near decade that you were on the road with Toto, like, were there any acts, like newer acts, that stood out to you?
Well, newer acts, I feel like I want to go to my playlists and take a look, just because my memory is so horrible. Who are these people that I'm looking at? I also have to go back and look and ask my daughters, because there's nobody really that new that I really listen to all that much. I mean, I still listen to like the girl in Paramore. What's her name?
Hayley Williams.
I absolutely just think she's the most outstanding singer. Just fantastic singer. I'm hugely fond of Keane.
Yeah, they're great. They've been on the podcast.
Oh yeah, I absolutely, that guy, that singer just absolutely blows my mind. So you know, but in terms of like modern pop, I mean, in terms of like, you know, like current artists that are doing pop right now, I couldn't even name one. I'd have to just go on, you know what it is? I'd have to just go on Spotify and bip around for a bit. Go, oh yeah, that's that guy. You know what I mean? It's like connecting songs to names is always really hard for me.
Yeah.
Unless you're talking about the Beatles or Led Zeppelin, or, you know, people from my generation.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of like, you know, slightly subpar music out there as well. So it takes some looking for. So you chose a song by Peter Gabriel on this album and did a reinterpretation of it. Is that one of your favorite Peter Gabriel tunes? Like, I remember that there's this story that Elton John used to tell about him, you know, doing loads of coke and crying and listening to "Don't Give Up" by Peter Gabriel, and that kind of helping him. So it's a great. He did the original with Kate Bush, didn't he, Peter Gabriel?
Yes, he did. I love that song so much, and it's one of my favorites of his stuff. It's I don't know what my favorite would be. It's one of my favorites, but it was like If I Fell. I don't know. I think I came across my computer one day or something, and I just went like that, because I thought of doing it as a duet, and I thought with my daughter might be a great way to do that particular story as a kind of a father-daughter thing. And then I just started working on it. I just started working on a sort of a very different type of arrangement than what the original is. It's very different.
Yeah.
And so I thought that might be cool.
It was really cool, and it wasn't actually obvious that it was the Peter Gabriel tune,
right?
Until like nearly 2 minutes in. I was like, hang on, is this that tune? So it was a really good like reimagination of it. And you know, I guess that was the right thing to do there. Whereas to redo like If I Fell or something like that, you know, would have been a bit harder to do a new arrangement of that, and probably a bit like sacrilege, really, for the Beatles. But so in terms of your own like songwriting process, like is it pretty similar every time? Do ideas just come into your head and then you store them in an iPhone, or do you sit down to write songs, and say like, I'm gonna spend all morning writing tunes? Like,
the funny thing about the storing ideas on the iPhone thing is that I do that, but every time all the ideas, like I hum them on an iPhone, I never use them. I never go back and use. Every time I go back and listen to them, it's like without the context, they never make any sense to me. So it's so funny that because I still do it though. I still have hum ideas into the phone, but really the method that I use more than ever is that I usually produce as I'm writing. That's usually the method that I use more than ever, which is basically that I come up with a musical idea, and I kind of just proceed with writing the next section or producing it, kind of getting the sound of the band and all of that in a demo form if it's going to be recorded again with musicians. But just getting the sound up and then let the song organically grow from the production, because sometimes there's something in the production that will alert me to what the melody is going to be, as opposed to another way of writing, which is that you have an instrument and you kind of writing the melody and words as you go along, which I do that too. But what on this album, more often than not, it was a kind of producing as I go, and then the melodies came as a result of something in the production.
So it's kind of like when you're already in the zone. What about lyrics? How long do you labor over lyrics when you're songwriting?
For me, on my songs, when I'm writing the lyrics for my songs, it's not a labor at all. It's just, I don't know why.
So in terms of your role in Toto live, like when you came back and started touring again, how difficult do you find the kind of frontman aspect of what you do? Because you've been working in television and composing, and you'd not been out there live. So initially, was that something that you were kind of nervous about, getting back on stage and the front man, kind of a lot of pressure in terms of delivering a performance? Or was that something that you really relished, actually getting back out there?
It was something I relished. I was not in any way afraid or apprehensive about getting back on stage in front of people. I was definitely freaked out about my voice. How was I going to do that? How was I going to handle shows in a row? How was it going to be? Because the only reference I had was from the days of old, when it was kind of difficult. So that was what my concern was. In terms of standing up in front of an audience and being a ham, that didn't bother me. I've been doing that my whole life. So I was just concerned. That was why I went to a teacher. I was like, I'm going to go learn how to do this right, so I don't have a problem, But I was ready to get up off of this chair and from the composing seat and get back out there and do what I actually love to do more than anything, which is perform.
Yeah. I mean, the joy definitely comes across. So, congrats on your new album and on Toto getting back together. I think a lot of people are very happy about that. One final question for you, as this is the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. What kind of music for you, off the top of your head, what acts and artists represent the greatest music of all time for you? The music with the most sentimental meaning?
Wow. Well, I can't answer that question without bringing up some of the great composers of some of the great movie scores. Just because that music is some of the great stuff that has moved me over the years, and that has to be part of my answer. Obviously, artists like the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and Led Zeppelin, those are my influences. Those are the singers who influenced me more than anything. But in terms of other music that's influenced me, it's the dramatic, the drama and the pathos that music, the accompaniment music to picture that is astounding to me. That just blows my mind. And it makes sense because that's what I grew up with. I mean, I grew up in a household with a parent who does that for a living. So it still blows my mind to how that works, how music can be put to picture and just changes the whole emotion.